Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So it is time for my March wrap-up, and I'm pretty proud of how this month went reading-wise. I actually got through quite a few books, and some of them were pretty big books, so I did a ton of reading this month, and I'm going to tell you about the books I read. So the first and the smallest book in my wrap-up is A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. This has just been sitting on my shelf for who knows how long, and I was like, this is really short. It's a tiny play, and I am sure that I will be amused by it, so why don't I just go ahead and read it. And I was in the middle of two really big books at the time, so it was nice to have something short so that I could finish it and get that sort of sense of satisfaction I get from reading a book, or from finishing a book, I mean. I like this alright. It's probably not my favorite Shakespeare. It was cute, it was funny, but I also found it a bit confusing, and yeah, it's just alright. So the next book that I finished in the month of March is one that I buddy read with Elena over at Elena Reads Books, and that is Enda by Sherwood Smith. And if you are also a subscriber of Novels and Nonsense, Sam's channel, you will have heard plenty about this book. But it is the story of a boy named Enda. He is the second son of like a prince, I think, something like that. Second sons are historically stay home and take care of the castle and like hold the home front down, but because they're in a time of war, they send for the second sons to be trained at the academy where the first sons are trained. And so Enda ends up going to this academy, and it sort of follows him there, and he is a really smart and like born leader, and he's just like a really intelligent, interesting person. And he sort of catches the eye of some powerful people, but not so much in the right way. And this sort of follows what happens to him as consequence of that, and of consequences of his friendships that he makes at the academy. And I liked this book. I didn't love it. I think the hardest thing for me, well, the two hardest things. One, the names are intense. Sherwood Smith makes up all of these names and titles, and basically everybody in the book has a name, a title, a nickname, and then somewhere along the line, some of their titles change and some of their nicknames change. And so it was hard for me at first to keep track of who the characters were. And so that was a little frustrating. And I also felt like for some reason this just read really slow, and I don't know if it was the language or if it was... I really don't know, because I didn't find the story itself to be dry or unentertaining. I just thought that it was hard and slow to read, and I don't know. I thought the end of the book was definitely stronger than the beginning, but it's one of those things where you can tell that this is a like high fantasy arc, like it's a long arc. And I think there are 4 books in the series, and you can tell this is the first book and that it's setting a whole lot of stuff up, because I really felt like nothing happened. Like, a lot of things happened, but I also felt like there was no big climactic event. Even what happens at the end of the book really wasn't all that exciting, I thought, but it did sort of set up a larger series. So I am interested to continue on this series, and I believe that starting actually today, Sam is doing a Enda Club read-along. I will link to that video down below, and I will be joining them in the month of May and reading The Fox, which is the second one in this series. So yes, if you're interested in reading this, definitely you should go check out the Club Enda video and Goodreads group. So after reading Enda, I really wanted something that was going to be quick-paced and just like a fast read for me, and something I didn't have to think too hard about. So I decided to pick up a YA book, and there were a couple of them that I was choosing between, but I ended up going with The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. And I actually found this at my secondhand bookstore, and I was really surprised to see it there because it only came out in January, and I actually just loved this book. I don't remember if it was on my 2015 most anticipated reads. I think it was, but this was a book that I was kind of hesitant about because the only thing by Holly Black that I had read was in My True Love Gave to Me, and I wasn't super impressed with it, but I'd heard a lot of people talk about how her standalone fantasy novels were really interesting, and so I was excited that this was a standalone fantasy novel and that it was short and quick, and so I decided to go ahead and read it. And this is so entertaining. It's about a girl and her brother, and she basically wants to like be a monster slayer, and they live in this village that is kind of intertwined with the fairy community or the fae community, and they always sort of play tricks, but lately it's been getting worse and tourists have been going missing and things like that. And there's a boy who has for centuries been asleep in a glass coffin in the middle of the woods, and nothing ever wakes him, and he's sort of like a tourist attraction and everything. And then one day somebody breaks his coffin and he's gone. And so this sort of follows the events that follow that, and I just thought that for it being such a short book and being YA, that the character development was incredible, and I was really entertained throughout the whole thing, and I felt like there were great twists and turns, and there were moments where I was really freaked out because the characters that she creates, the just like magical characters that she creates, are insane and terrifying and amazing, and so I definitely recommend this. This was probably one of my favorite books that I read this month. So you have probably been hearing an awful lot about Year of Cosmere across BookTube, and I too am joining in. I was a little late to the bandwagon, but I did read The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson this month, and I really enjoyed this. You have probably heard a million people talk about what this is about, but basically the little blurb here kind of says a great deal about it, which is, what if the Dark Lord won? So this is about a society that is in just pure misery and everything is basically awful, and it follows these characters who are sort of forming this group to try to end the misery, to fight against this Lord Ruler who everybody thinks is the ultimate baddie, basically. And it's just interesting because you get to know all the different characters, and there's an incredible magic system where they swallow metals and then they burn them in their stomachs, and they can do all kinds of different things like pushing and pulling against steel, which that is just insane. When I think about it, it scares the crap out of me because I'm like, it's basically like flying except with nothing to catch you if that piece of metal gets moved. So it's just, the magic system in this is incredible, and I know everybody says that, but it really is. And he does a great job with character development and with creating suspense, and I loved how at the beginning of each chapter there's like this italicized portion, and I wasn't really sure what that was, and you don't 100% find out what it is until later on into the book, and then once you realize what it is, I ended up going back and rereading them all because I was so fascinated, and I wanted to sort of like put it together in sequence so that I could be like, oh, well that makes sense. But that is a really cool aspect of the way the book is set up, which I'm not going to tell you any more about because it would be spoilery. But yes, I really enjoyed this, and I am 300 pages into Well of Ascension, so I'm just trucking right along. Alright, if you haven't heard about this one, you are probably living under a rock. I had put out on Instagram, which one should I read, and it was The Winter's Curse or The Martian, and everyone responded and was like, you have to read The Martian, and I decided, alright, well, I've heard a ton about it. I think I heard about it originally on Sarah Actually Reads channel. I heard her talking about it, and just the way she talked about it, I was like, that sounds like an awesome book. And then I've just heard endless great things about it. I pretty much have not heard a bad thing about this book. It follows a man named Mark Watney who is part of a Mars mission, and there's like a sandstorm or a dust storm on like their I think it was like their 6th day there, and things happen and they are told to abort the mission, and in the process of aborting the mission, Mark Watney gets left behind. And his crew members think he's dead, and he's not. And it follows basically his survival on Mars. And it's hilarious. Like, if I could say one thing about this book, it is so funny. And you think a survival story on Mars sounds like it cannot be that funny, but it's just that it's like you take somebody who has just a dry and ridiculous sense of humor anyways, and then you put them in a dire situation, and they're just gonna probably be more ridiculous because that's how they cope with life. And so I thought that was hilarious, and it's just, yeah. It also has like a lot of sciencey things in there, and science was never my best subject in school, but that didn't deter me at all, and I actually found that stuff kind of interesting, and the way that he sort of talks about it and explains it is easy and approachable and great, and it's written sort of like a diary log, so it's like log entries, and then there's the parts about what's happening down on Earth once they do realize that he's alive, because Earth does at one point realize that he's alive. And that's hilarious too. But I will say, if you are not a fan of strong language, you don't like a lot of cussing in books, then this is probably not something you're going to enjoy that much, because there is quite a lot of strong language. I'm pretty sure the F word is like the 3rd word in the book. That doesn't bother me. I think cussing is funny. But I know that I have some viewers that definitely don't appreciate strong language, and this is heavy on the strong language. But other than that, I would definitely recommend this to anybody, because I think it's one of the most approachable books that I have read in a long time, and my boyfriend thought it was, or fiance, why do I say, I don't know why I can't get the fiance thing down. We've been engaged for a year now, and I still keep saying boyfriend. Anyways, that's completely off topic. He read this, he loved it, and yeah, I can't recommend it enough. And the last book that I read this month is one that I was sent for review by St. Martin's Press. I actually requested this book and was so excited that it showed up at my house, so I really appreciate that. Her name is Rose, and I will have a full review on this posted on my channel it'll be up, I believe the 14th is when the book comes out, so the video will go up the morning of the 14th. So look for that if you are interested in this. This is basically the story of a woman named Iris and her daughter Rose, and Iris is sort of at a kind of crossroads in her life. Her husband passed away, she's lost her job, and she doesn't really know what to do with herself, and she gets some sort of not so great or not so encouraging news at the doctor's, and she's made a promise to her late husband that she will find Rose's birth mother, because Rose is their adopted daughter. And so she goes on this journey to find Rose's birth mother, and it's really interesting the sort of things that happen along the way, and we get to know her, we get to know Rose, because it's told in multiple perspectives. And so we have Iris's perspective, and then we have Rose's perspective, because things aren't all roses, haha, in Rose's life either. And that was bad, I'm sorry guys. But anyways, but it's really interesting, the journey that she goes on, and we meet some other characters. There's a character named Rowan in here, which I won't give too much information about because it would be a spoiler. His story was my favorite. I did find the transition to his perspective kind of jarring, because we weren't really given any lead up that he even existed, and then suddenly we had his perspective. So there were some things about this book that I thought were a little lacking, but for the most part I really, really enjoyed this book, and I think that it's definitely worth the read. It's a great story about family, and it also sort of addresses the way that people deal with grief and moving on and things like that. So I thought this was really fantastic, and I was excited to get to read it. Alright, so that is it for my March wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing a little bit about the books that I read this month. I would love to hear what you guys read this month, so let me know in the comments. And if you've read any of these books or are looking forward to picking them up, definitely, talk about it in the comments. I love talking about the books I've read or hearing your recommendations, things like that. So yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye!